It's like, wow.
Hello. Welcome to Is Anyone Buying It? This is a panel at VICA's 23rd Annual Business Forecast Conference. My name is Lane Lawson. I'm the Director of Public Affairs for Clear Channel Outdoor, proud sponsor of this track. Stop This Train, I Want to Get Off is the track, is the name of the track. I'd like to also introduce our panel sponsors for today, Bank of America and Vulcan Materials. At your seat, there's an exit survey for this panel. I encourage you to fill it out at the end of this panel session and return it to the staff at the back of the room or the registration booth in the foyer. VICA needs your feedback in order to prepare for next year's event. There's also a sign-in sheet that's going around. If you could please sign in. Make sure you put your name, the company, and your email address. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to the moderator of this panel, Jacqueline Giovis, the editor of the San Fernando Valley Business Journal. Jacqueline, thank you for agreeing to be the moderator for this morning's panel.
Great. Thank you so much, Lane. Good morning, everyone. In this session, we'll consider the real estate market and explore the theme, is anyone buying it? We have a great panel lined up, but please first let me thank our sponsors, Clear Channel Outdoor for being our track sponsor, and Bank of America and Vulcan Materials for sponsoring the real estate panel. The biographies of each of the panelists are already in your booklet, so I'm going to make these introductions just very brief so that we can have more time for questions. To my left here, we have Richard Bright, Senior Managing Director for CBRE Group. And then we have Paul Habibi, a lecturer with UCLA's Graduate School of Management. Steve Johnson, Director for their Southern California Region Metro Study. And we have Kirk Lesh, the Senior Economist at the Center for Economic Research and Forecasting at California Lutheran University. So the real estate market has had a lot of ups and downs. We all have know all too well about that. The big question is what's going to happen next? So I'm going to turn it over to our panelists to give some brief 2 to 3 minute remarks and just kind of give you their sense of the market and where things are headed. And then after that, we'll just head straight into the questions. So Richard, you want to kick it off for us?
Thank you, Jacqueline. Appreciate it, and appreciate everybody being here this morning. I think this will be an interesting topic, and certainly one that's near and dear to my heart. So, is anybody buying it? Well, certainly in our opinion, if you're not, you should be, and you should be strongly considering it. I mean, the apocalyptic now that that we thought was coming, that we thought the end was near, we don't see as happening. I mean, it's certainly remaining challenging for landlords and for owners, but I think if you're a tenant or a buyer, clearly it's a great time. I mean, we're suffering from years of over leveraging, and from all our economic tracking, we look like we're about 2/3 of the way through this, so to speak, deleveraging process, and we're asked to do thousands of broker opinions of values from all our professionals across, not only in the U.S., but also California and then locally. And these are from insurance companies, from owners, from special servicers, from lenders. And we really expected there to be this huge wave of distressed assets coming through. And the reality is, I could probably count on 2 hands the number of true distressed assets that came through. So we're seeing a lot of workouts getting done. Our transaction volume is up year over year. We're up 20% from where we were from 2009 to 2010. We're up about 15% from 2010 to year-to-date 2011. So we're actually seeing more and more transactions. I'd say probably 60% of our business right now is coming through the leasing market. About 40% is coming through our sales activity. We're seeing longer-term deals today than we were seeing really 12 months ago. A lot of people were certainly concerned about the market. They were looking at 6-month deals and 1-year deals and just trying to say, we don't know what's happening tomorrow. Today, you're seeing a much more aggressive approach. People saying, wait a minute, let's look at 5, 7, and 10-year economics. Let's look at taking advantage of maybe the wrong word, but looking at the market today and saying, maybe I've got 2 years left on a lease and moving forward. Renewals are very active right now, and owner-user activity. Those are really your buy side. I mean, if you, maybe we'll get into it, I don't know if you'll ask the question, but 3 of the largest transactions in Los Angeles happened right here in the San Fernando Valley. So I think there's a new sense of reality that people are coming to grips with. The recovery, we think, and I'll use the word recovery, is lumpy. You know, we track over 50 submarkets from San Luis Obispo to Irwindale up to Santa Clarita. And, you know, in some of those markets, you've got 20 and 30% vacancy. Yet in other markets, like up in Valencia, we're starting to see development rear its ugly head. I mean, you've got a 2.6% vacancy rate in the industrial market. And if you're a tenant of 100,000 square feet or larger, there's nowhere to go. So it's really market by market. We're cautiously optimistic. I think we're at or near the bottom. You know, you've got a limited supply of space out there. You know, I think any demand, we'll find out from our panelists here, but I think any demand certainly going to help vacancy. We expect rents to climb here in the near future. Right now we're somewhat stable. And with that, I'll pass it over to Paul.
Good morning. My name is Paul Habibi. Thanks for having me. I'll build on some of what Richard said. I think he touched on some very interesting themes. The first is distress, and I think if we look back on the last major real estate crisis we had back in the early 90s, we saw a big fallout in the commercial sector. We saw all the stuff go into resolution trust. This time around, it's been different. The main reason it's been different, aside from the government not necessarily forcing any bad assets into a resolution trust corporation, is because we've had such a low interest rate environment. And that interest rate environment has really enabled commercial property owners to be able to hang on to their assets, to do workouts and restructurings. And that's been a little bit of a boon on the commercial side. Of course, on the residential side, we haven't seen such luck. We've had a ton of policy interventions, many of which have been proven unfruitful. But the good news there is if we look at the fundamentals, we look at price to rents, price to incomes, we're basically at the bottom of the real estate cycle. A little bit of irony on the interest rate side of things is that, you know, I think if a lot of prospective buyers in the housing cycle are looking at the decision to purchase, of course, for those who want to buy, who can't, who are getting who are underqualified, they've seen their average FICO score of what's required to buy a house go up dramatically. And so you're either not able to buy a house these days, or if you do potentially want to buy a house, you're making that decision based on the cost to rent versus the cost to own. Right now, in most gateway cities, LA included, the cost to rent is substantially less than the cost to purchase. And so the prospective home buyer is faced with a decision on renting or buying. If you're faced with a low interest rate environment, that's obviously good news. We're at a low price-wise. We potentially could have some further deterioration in pricing. But the big issue right now is the expectations of appreciation are virtually zero for the next couple of years, which has created a little bit of a crisis of confidence. So you look at the sweet spot between low interest rates and pricing, you ask yourself, are interest rates going to stay where they are? They probably will for the next couple of years, but prices could potentially deteriorate, if not stay flat for the next few years. So that's really what's provided a little bit of an anchor on single-family home prices. Speaking over to commercial sector just for a couple of minutes, I think the recovery has been very bifurcated between the A assets and the B and C assets. If you look at what cap rates have done relative to treasuries, they've actually narrowed in the A asset classes across all commercial product types, and they've widened in the B and C asset classes. This is the flight to quality that we've seen across the globe. We've seen a flight into treasuries. You know, the treasury yield, although it jumped up a little bit yesterday, is still, you know, in the low twos. The price of gold is high. Certainly a lot of issues with people being risk averse in the marketplace, and I think in commercial real estate we're really seeing that. I'll touch for a second on product types. The product types that seem to be struggling the most these days are still office and retail, and multifamily seems to be the beneficiary of a lousy housing market, as well as just being lower on the risk curve. We've had obviously very high unemployment rate, but if you kind of look at that data and where the jobs are coming from, 2/3 of all new jobs are being generated in the 20 to 34 age group. We're seeing household formations at about half of what they typically are. that is projected to rise. The birth rate increases in good times as opposed to a recession. And finally, we have about 3 million individuals who moved back in with mom and dad who are now ready to form households. And so that's been a blessing for multifamily. Multifamily seems to be one of the strongest sectors nowadays, and it's probably positioned for better growth projections than the rest of the market. With that, I'll pass along to Steve.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm Steve Johnson with Metro Study, and I'm going to touch on some of the residential aspects of what's occurring out there in the markets today. We're finding that, you know, what you see is kind of what you get right now in regards to total volume. You know, California Association of Realtors thinks this year is going to come in about 491,000 units or homes sold throughout the state of California. And next year, they've had to revise their forecast twice this year. It was as high as 510,000, and we're really at 491. And next year, we're looking at about 491.5, 492. So it doesn't get a lot better. Part of that reason, of course, is the changes that we need done from a demand standpoint. Our problem has been that Washington has been so focused on supply, on the word foreclosure, on shadow inventory. They really haven't spent any time working on how we get rid of that, which would be the demand side of the equation, and that's where the time needs to be spent. What we've done is we've taken away all the vehicles for that inventory in a normal cycle to be able to move into new owners' hands. In other words, it's very hard to get a loan. All the financing vehicles, the credit changes that have happened, you know, we just are not collateralizing like we did. And so we have a lot of changes that need to take place, and it takes time for that to occur. And so what I mean is this is going to be a protracted recovery in the residential markets. And one of the problems there, of course, will be that we're going to move a lot of inventory into the rental markets. For those of you who do have rental properties, you may find that in your neighborhoods it becomes very competitive to fill your inventories because a lot of the shadow inventory that the federal government's going to push out to investors will probably be in those rental markets. And so there may be some slight disruptions in some of the single-family as well as multifamily markets as we adjust to that. It's been very hard to rebuild our machine that employed literally hundreds of thousands of people in California, which was the new home industry. The top 10 public builders made 54% of their profits and income in the western United States, and they've been hit very, very hard.